5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action.
Andy Warhol's greatest work of art is Andy Warhol.
He was big.
Genius.
Art, music, film,
Fashion.
He created his own style, his own affectations.
Now, Andy Warhol's diaries were published posthumously. And here you are, you've taken this massive book and whittled it down to I guess what you think is its essence. How would he have felt having worked so hard to keep his private life private, but his public life, not so much? How would he have felt knowing that all this information is out there?
I think that Andy created the diaries and participated with Pat in communicating everything that he did the night before on the phone the next day for a reason. And I think that he would have been happy to see that the diaries could exist in another medium besides just the book. But they are open to interpretation. And I adapted them with a very particular lens that I felt was the core to understanding Andy in a way that had not been really revealed before, which is a love story.
The wig, what he says, that's a guy's.
The diaries are Andy's thoughts in Andy's words. No other part of his work shows this.
Did you have to take any special legal precautions before you made the film, the series?
Well, when the book was published, it was seen as scandalous because of its list of celebrity parties and the drug use of various people, and sort of gossip. And really that was not what I was interested in. I was interested in the sort of shocking details that Andy discussed about himself, his raw emotions, his vulnerability. So I didn't feel that I needed to take special legal precautions because Andy was putting himself on display, and the Warhol Foundation was happy for me to tell that story because I think it humanizes Andy, to understand the man behind the public performance.
Andy's wish is finally coming true.
Warhol was so good at hiding parts of his life.
Was Andy out?
Well, he was never in, so...
There's all of these little stories that are still there to be uncovered.
He dominated an entire era in pop culture and New York. He changed the landscape for so many people, and part of that was the factory. And that became a hotbed of art because he let people do what they wanted to do. I think that's one of the most important parts of his legacy. Would you agree? I mean, aside from his artwork.
I absolutely agree. And Andy was sending out smoke signals, as Mark Ballard says, in the 1960s with the factory. But what I really wanted to do was to show that siren call or that invitation and that feeling of giving permission continued into the 1980s when the factory became a place where Jean-Michel Basquiat did incredible work with Andy in the collaboration paintings, and Keith Haring and Futura 2000 and Andre Walker and others were coming to Union Square, to Andy Warhol Enterprises, to work with him and to hang out together. And, Andy extended from so many eras from the 1960s into the 1980s. And we forget that, I think.
To Catholic imagery that surely is related to the AIDS crisis.
There are things that you can see in the work.
People living away from the big city, long, long way from New York, were inspired by his magazines, his image, his art, his radicalness to do more, I think, with their lives. And I think that is a measurable legacy. What would you say to that?
I think that that's absolutely right. I think he gave us permission to reinvent ourselves and to aspire to be a self that we create from the ground up. And many people who feel for one reason because of their identity or the way that they live their lives that they don't fit in, Andy provides a safe space and an embrace for them.
This quote of his, "You want to know anything about my work, look behind it, there's nothing there," is really just not true. Within the diaries, there are these clues that he did have these intimate relationships.
I don't think you're old enough to have like been there at the factory. So tell me what drew you.
Well, so, I grew up in New York City. My father took me to galleries when I was a child, and I saw Andy's work there, and it struck me immediately. I watched Andy Warhol's TV on public access cable in New York. And as a bisexual man figuring myself out, Andy was a role model, and he was a safe space in a very homophobic world in the 1980s. So I try to think back, did I ever see him on the street in New York? I'm sure I did, or people would talk about, oh, look, there's Andy. And I sort of slowly discovered that there was this man, this icon who represented something and was very special to me. I reread the diaries and was just stunned to hear about all of his passion for Jed and for John Gould, his spiritual search for meaning in life. It astonished me, and I knew that would be sort of a gift to myself and to others to bring that to the screen.
He broke every rule. He made you look at things in a completely different way, and that's what art is.
He was just very sensitive about where he fit in.
There was this dream, this desire to be someone else, to escape.
I'm just a freak. I wasn't very close to anyone. Although, I guess I wanted to be.